Hello lovelies, it strikes me as only fair to give the Brexit headbangers a chance to convince me that Brexit will actually be this wonderful, amazing thing that they think it's going to be. So I tried approaching Brexiteers as an adult in that other video I did on this, and was markedly unsuccessful. Just the usual kind of abuse and so on. Very little in the way of adult or sensible conversation, but I don't learn. Or you can interpret that as me being persistent and enduring and stoic, if you prefer. But here's my concerns that you'll need to address to convince me that Brexit is a good idea. Economics. Now, the official employment figures are actually quite good lately, possibly because the UK economy is still growing, though that growth has slowed markedly since the Brexit vote, and is likely to slow again now that Bojo's in and is talking up a no-deal Brexit. But at the same time, those figures are massaged. And we know from, I think it's the Federation of Small Businesses, one of those groups, that already about 250,000 jobs have been lost due to Brexit. And there are many more to come, depending on what happens next. It could be a massive amount. Yeah, and it's not just bankers whose jobs are going abroad. It's things like car manufacturing and so on. So we're likely to get a massive unemployment hit, which will only partially be compensated for by the fact that we're excluding EU people from coming over. But that just means we're going to have to allow more non-EU people over, and EU migrants pay more in than non-EU migrants do. So all things considered, in the whole around, we're going to be a lot worse off and a lot more likely to be unemployed. Speaking of businesses flying to the continent, many of the banks and so on already have. Now, you might not have a great deal of sympathy for banks, and I'm right there with you, but the financial sector, the services sector, is the sector that really makes the most money in the UK. And even though we're not really taxing them as much as we should be, they're still, the major pay-in to the exchequer. A few other businesses here and there. By comparison, fishermen, which people have been really concerned for, and I share your concerns, but they're only around or less than 1% of the economy compared. They're not. It's not exactly life or death for the country as a whole, much as I'd like to see them continue. So you've got to worry about that. Now, the pound took a serious knock when the Brexit vote went through, from which it barely recovered, and now it's taken another huge knock again from Bojo getting elected. The pound is now one of the worst performing currencies in the world. I'm sure there's quite a gap between the pound and the next few others, but it's not doing well, right? And that means your purchasing power for anything that has to be imported, which in the UK is an awful lot of things, is going to go up, and that's going to hit you at the checkout, it's going to hit you at the supermarket, it's going to hit you everywhere else. And if we do actually follow through and Brexit, it's going to get hit again. We might be down to on par with the dollar. That's how bad it's going to be. Now, I get paid in dollars, this is actually in my favour, but I'm capable of looking beyond myself to the way this is going to affect other people, and it still affects my purchasing power even if I mostly get paid in dollars. This is not good for anybody. Okay, so you think the world is going to open up to us, we can make our own trade deals and so on. Well, that's true, but we're going to lose all the trade deals that we have through the EU, and when we go to negotiate new deals, it's going to take a long time. We no longer have the diplomatic staff to do it. They're scrabbling around trying to find anyone and everyone to make these deals, and we're unlikely to get as good deals, because Britain by itself, even though we're a big economy, is smaller than the EU as a collective economy, and so we can't bargain with the same kind of power and impetus that the EU can. We'll make up some of that difference because any deals we make will be specialised to the UK economy, But even so, unemployment, businesses are flying to Ireland and Germany and elsewhere. Germany's been poaching our tech workers ever since the Brexit vote. The pound will be fucked, and we won't be able to make good deals. So you need to assuage my fears there for me to be convinced that Brexit is a good idea. Politics. Brexit has an horrendous effect on our politics. In some ways, I'm kind of glad that it happened, because it has underlined a lot of the fractures and strains and problems in our democracy, in that it's not very democratic. But the vote itself was not very democratic. The Vote Leave campaign broke the law multiple ways, overspent by a huge amount, in comparison to which the Liberal Democrat campaign associated with Remain slightly overspent, but it's really just accounting errors. It's not millions upon millions of pounds as happened with the Leave campaign. Nor are there dodgy shenanigans there, as there are with the Leave campaign and Aaron Banks and his diamond mines that aren't diamond mines, and all the rest of it. Yeah, and this did go to court, and the court did rule that if this had been a binding vote, it would have been illegal and would have had to have been overturned. So the vote was not democratic, it was corrupted, it was based upon lies and massive overspends by the Leave campaign. They broke the law. It's an illegal vote, and yet it's being forced through as if it's gospel. If we have a second clean vote, that problem goes away, but a lot of you seem to be against that for some reason, though I thought you were pro-democracy. But the vote itself was undemocratic, and everything that's happened since has shown everything relating to this to be undemocratic. The changeover of leadership in the Tory party without an election, right? Now that's how things normally go, but it's not very democratic, and many of the people happy to support Bojo getting in were really upset when Brown took over from Blair, right? And justifiably, right? Because it wasn't very democratic. So there should be an election, but do we have the time to waste on an election? And that's not... that confuses the issue. It's not a clean vote. Boris and others are on about proroguing Parliament, basically dissolving Parliament so that they can't block a no-deal Brexit. That's not very democratic. Others are talking about getting the Queen to intervene one way or the other. That's not democratic. They would put the final nail in the coffin of royal power in the UK, so that's not necessarily a bad thing in the long term, but still. Plus we're forcing Brexit on a bunch of people that never voted for it. Over half now, and increasing all the time, of the country does not want Brexit. If it's a no-deal Brexit or Remain, no deal loses, quite clearly and well over the margin of error. So why are we going through with it? It makes no sense. Scotland didn't vote for it, right? And we're forcing them to come along with us. So that's a problem. There's all these deficits of democracy in our own system, and yet people complain about the EU, which is, I'm afraid to repeat again and again, much more democratic than the UK. You may not see it, you may not understand it, but it is. Speaking of Scotland, Brexiting threatens to break up the Union. There is almost certainly going to be another vote, and if we're not still part of Europe, it seems likely that Scotland will leave and then start their own application process to join Europe. Now, I'm not wedded to the idea of the Union. I would prefer that these regions stayed part of the Union because they help offset Tory power. If they leave, we're basically stuck with a Conservative government forever. It seems like. So, it's not good for me, but if they want to leave, as far as I'm concerned, fair enough. And Wales, fair enough. But I don't particularly want them to. I just respect their actual wishes in a clean vote, which we didn't get on Brexit. But is this what people who voted for Brexit voted for? Did they vote for the breakup of the Union? And Wales is making increasing independence noises as well now. So we're almost certain to lose Scotland if we go through with Brexit, and we're quite likely to lose Wales a little further down the line. And then there's Northern Ireland. That's a powder keg. There's a border there, there's going to be no solution to that. Boris is on about ignoring and removing the backstop. That's pissed off the Irish and a lot of people in Northern Ireland and a lot of people in Europe. And Sinn Fein has come out and said that if direct rule is reinstituted, which Boris has mentioned, or if there's a no-deal Brexit, then the IRA is likely to take up arms again. That doesn't seem like a good idea to me. Does it to you? Personal security and liberty. So the IRA is likely to start back up again. That's not good. You know, I lived through bombings and things before. Was in quite close proximity to one of them. I've had friends who've been showered with glass from bombs going off and so on back in the day, and I don't really want to get back to that. You know, such a hard-won peace. Yeah, with a roadmap for slow, incremental democratic change through the future. I don't want the IRA to start up again, and it seems needless and pointless to provoke them into starting up their action again. And if we are facing new terrorist threats, we're not going to have as easy access to Europol information or the information from the intelligence services across Europe, so we're going to be more vulnerable if we leave. That's concerning. And then there's Islamic terrorism and far-right terrorism and all the other forms of terrorism from the many enemies that we have, and that's a big problem. If we don't have access to that information, or as easy access to that information, we're at a disadvantage when it comes to combating that. So we lose all that information sharing. The NHS is under threat. I wasn't quite sure where to put this, economics or personal security and liberty, but I think the right to health comes under personal liberties. So the NHS is being starved of funding by the Tories, has been for some time. It carries on regardless, thanks to heroic sacrifices by a huge number of people, but it's going to be vulnerable post-Brexit. You know, any deal that we do with America, which is going to be the first one we probably strike a deal with, they want access to the NHS. They want access to the deals, the drugs, the tenders, the contracts, the patients, the information, everything. And America does not treat its people well when it comes to medicine. I don't want them anywhere near any part of the NHS. The part privatisation we've already got is horrendous. I don't want people being exploited, I want people being treated. So our access to health, our right to healthcare, is likely to come under threat. The EU has provided many guarantees to our personal rights, workers' rights, and so on, and membership of the EU confers special rights upon us that unless you're wealthy, you're not going to get otherwise. The right to travel, to settle elsewhere in Europe, to live, love and work wherever you want. You know, I'm a self-employed guy who has to supplement his income with benefits because he often can't work. What chance would I or anyone else like me have of being able to travel and to work elsewhere in Europe without these freedoms? People complain, oh, it's only the hoity-toity, you know, the people who go skiing or have a Swiss chalet or whatever, you know, the upper middle class that ever benefited from membership of the EU for travel. That's not true. They could always travel freely, they could always own property freely. What being members of the EU did was open up Europe. That's going, and all of our rights and protections and so on are under threat now. They're going to roll over a lot of them, but then they're going to start taking them away. And the EU does have problems when it comes to these issues, but it is more liberal, more libertine than we are. So we stand to lose all that. We stand to be less secure, more at threat, to have less rights. Where's the payoff? To convince me, you'll have to show me that we gain something. You'll have to show me that gain, whatever it is you think that it is enough to overcome the mass unemployment that is going to follow, the business flight to the continent, the weakening of the pound, our weakened position as a nation to make economic deals, to make up for all the ones that we're losing, you're going to have to convince me it's worth ignoring democracy and allowing a corruption of our democracy. You're going to have to show me that it's worth breaking up the union, that it's worth directly ruling Northern Ireland, potentially, and the IRA starting back up again. You're going to have to convince me that it's worth losing all the security and intelligence cooperation across Europe, that it's going to be worth selling off the NHS, that it's going to be worth all the personal rights, the workers' rights, and the European rights that we stand to lose and to have abrogated by our government. Good luck.
He said captain, I said what? He said captain, I said what? Once a lifetime, twice a day. If you don't work, you get no pay. I've been to the east, I've been to the west, but because I like most of the ones I'm dressed.